Rude talk show host confronts Keanu Reeves and Sandra Bullock, but their response stuns the audience. The studio lights beam down on the sleek black stage, reflecting off the glossy desk where the host sat, a smug grin stretched across his face. The audience buzzed with anticipation. After all, Keanu Reeves and Sandra Bullock were tonight's guests, a reunion that had fans excited. As the applause died down, Keanu and Sandra settled into their seats across from the host, their chemistry effortlessly warm, the kind that only years of friendship could build. The host, a man known for his sharp tongue and cutting humor, leaned in, his smirk widening. "So," he said, folding his hands together, "let's talk about Speed. I mean, that was, almost 30 years ago? Feeling old yet?" The audience chuckled nervously, but Sandra just laughed, flipping her hair back. "Well, time does move forward," she said playfully. "Weird how that works, huh?" Keanu, ever calm, simply nodded. "Yeah, time flies." But the host wasn't done. He tapped his fingers against his desk. "I mean, Keanu, you're still out here doing action films, dodging bullets, throwing punches, and you, Sandra, no offense, but you ever think Hollywood's going to stop calling?" The room went quiet. A few uneasy murmurs rippled through the audience. Sandra raised an eyebrow, but before she could speak, Keanu leaned forward slightly, his voice soft but firm. "Why would they stop calling?" The host scoffed, waving a dismissive hand. "Oh, you know, Hollywood's tough, especially when you're not 25 anymore." Sandra let out a dramatic gasp, clutching her chest in mock horror. "You mean I'm not 25? Laughter erupted from the crowd. Keanu smiled, shaking his head. "I think talent matters more than age," he said simply. The host chuckled, though his smugness wavered. Sure, he said. "But come on, you guys must look back at your early films and cringe a little, right?" Sandra tilted her head, pretending to think. "No," she said cheerfully. "I had a great time. Iconic movie, amazing cast, zero regrets." Keanu nodded. Same. The host faltered. He had been expecting them to squirm, to get defensive. Instead, they were unshaken, completely unfazed by his attempts to rattle them. The audience, sensing the shift, started clapping. It began as a few polite claps, then grew louder, more enthusiastic. The host forced a chuckle. "Well, I guess that's what makes you guys so loved. You're just untouchable, huh?" Sandra grinned. "No, we just don't waste time worrying about things that don't matter." Keanu added, "Life's too short for that." The audience erupted into cheers, and in that moment, the host realized he had lost control of the conversation. The applause rolled through the studio, drowning out the host's momentary hesitation. He shifted in his seat, adjusting his tie as if trying to regain his composure. But the energy in the room had shifted, and he knew it. Keanu and Sandra sat with quiet confidence, completely unshaken. The host forced a chuckle, leaning back in his chair. "Well," he said, trying to steer the conversation, "maybe that's why people love you two so much. Too cool to be bothered, huh?" Sandra shrugged, her smile easy. "It's not about being cool, it's about knowing what matters." Keanu nodded, his voice steady. "Respect matters, kindness matters, everything else?" He gave a small shake of his head. "Just noise." The audience clapped again, louder this time. The host opened his mouth, perhaps to pivot, perhaps to take back control, but he hesitated. He could feel it now, the shift in the air. He wasn't leading this moment anymore. Sandra turned toward the crowd, her eyes twinkling with amusement. "Besides," she said, grinning, "if we ever do start cringing at our old movies, we'll just remember, some people still can't stop talking about them." The room erupted. Laughter, cheers, applause. It filled every corner of the studio. Even some of the crew members off camera couldn't help but chuckle. The host, caught completely off guard, blinked. Then, finally, he let out a breathy laugh, raising his hands in surrender. All right, he said, shaking his head. "I give up. You two win." Keanu smiled. We weren't competing. Another round of applause swept through the crowd, sealing the moment. The host had started the conversation expecting easy jabs and awkward reactions. Instead, Keanu and Sandra had turned it into something else, something honest, something graceful. And as they moved on to the next segment, one thing was clear. The audience wouldn't forget this moment anytime soon. The host took a sip of water, using the pause to compose himself. He wasn't used to being outmaneuvered so effortlessly, especially not by guests who hadn't even tried to fight back. Keanu and Sandra had deflected his jabs with nothing but grace, and somehow, They were the ones controlling the room now. He cleared his throat. "All right," he said, forcing a grin. "Let's talk about your actual projects then. Keanu, John Wick 5, is it happening, or are we just dreaming?" Keanu chuckled, his demeanor as relaxed as ever. "I guess that depends on the dream," he said. "I love playing John. If there's a good story to tell, I'm open to it." The audience cheered. The host nodded quickly, trying to feed off the energy. Okay, fair answer. And Sandra, we need to know, will you and Keanu ever reunite on screen? Sandra glanced at Keanu, then back at the host. "Oh, we talk about it all the time," she teased, flashing a mischievous smile. "But only if he lets me drive this time." The crowd erupted again, remembering Speed. Even Keanu laughed, shaking his head. "You did great behind the wheel." The host, sensing a way to get back on track, leaned forward. "So are you saying there's a chance? Speed 3, maybe?" Sandra smirked. "Only if we can do it in wheelchairs this time. Make it extra dramatic." Laughter filled the room. Keanu played along, stroking his chin thoughtfully. "Yeah? Maybe the bus is in a retirement home parking lot. Still can't slow down." The host, realizing he had lost any hope of steering this conversation the way he originally planned, threw his hands up. "You two are impossible," he said, shaking his head. "But I get it now. This is why people love you. Unshakable, classy, and somehow still hilarious." Sandra winked. "Well, we try." The segment wrapped up with another burst of applause. The host had set out to put them on the spot, but instead, they had effortlessly won over the room. And as the cameras cut to commercial, even he had to admit, he understood why the world adored them.